Welcome to the Antigua channel. Here we bring you the vibrant heart of Antigua and Barbuda through immersive vlogs, cultural insights, and scenic adventures. Whether you are discovering the island's rich history, exploring its pristine beaches, or getting a taste of local life, the Antigua channel is your guide to all things Antigua. Hit subscribe and join us as we uncover the beauty, culture, and everyday magic of this Caribbean gem. Let's make every video a journey. Today we will have a deep dive into the history of Antigua and Barbuda, an enchanting Caribbean nation steeped in history, culture, and natural beauty. From the sparkling turquoise beaches to centuries-old historical landmarks, this twin island paradise has a story that reaches back thousands of years. We'll journey through the past, exploring the indigenous communities who first called these islands home, the trials of colonialism, the endurance of African heritage, the fight for independence, and how this history has shaped the Antigua and Barbuda of today. Our journey begins with the first settlers on these islands. Around 3100 BC, the Siboney people, believed to be among the first inhabitants, lived here. They fished, hunted, and crafted tools from shells, leaving traces of their existence across the Caribbean. Who are the Siboney people? The Siboney people, also known as Siboney, as in Ciboney, were among the earliest known inhabitants of the Caribbean, with a presence believed to date back as far as 3100 BC. They were a pre-agricultural group known for their simple nomadic lifestyle and their reliance on fishing, gathering, and hunting. The Siboney initially occupied regions across the Greater and Lesser Antilles, including parts of Cuba, Hispaniola, Jamaica, Puerto Rico, and possibly islands like Antigua and Barbuda. The key characteristics of Siboney people include: first, simple technology and tools. The Siboney created tools from stone and shell, which archaeologists identified as lithic or Stone Age in design. They made fish hooks, plates, and other essential tools using the materials available on the islands. Second characteristic, nomadic lifestyle. Unlike later groups who engaged in more advanced farming, the Siboney were nomadic and moved frequently in search of food. Their diet consisted mainly of seafood, small game, and gathered fruits. Third characteristic, cultural artifacts. Archaeological findings such as shell middens, these are heaps of shell remains, tools, and petroglyphs, which is rock carvings, provide insights into Siboney culture and lifestyle. These remnants indicate a relatively simple way of life with minimal material possessions. Fourth characteristic, relations with other indigenous groups. Later, the Arawaks, who were more agriculturally advanced and established, migrated to the Caribbean. By around the 13th century, the Caribs, who were known to be more aggressive and engaged in frequent warfare, displaced or absorbed both the Siboney and Arawak populations in some regions. After the Siboney people settled in, centuries later, the Arawaks arrived, an agrarian society with skills in pottery and weaving. They cultivated crops like cassava and lived in organized, peaceful communities, bringing stability and prosperity to the islands. However, by the 13th century, the Caribs, a more dominant and warrior-like group, migrated here, often clashing with the Arawaks. Now, who are the Arawaks? The Arawaks, also known as the Taino, were an indigenous people of the Caribbean who are believed to have migrated from the northeastern coast of South America around 1000 BCE. They were the primary inhabitants of the Greater Antilles, including Cuba, Hispaniola, Jamaica, and Puerto Rico, and parts of the Lesser Antilles, such as the Bahamas. By the time European explorers arrived in the late 15th century, known for their agrarian lifestyle, social organization, and artistic achievements, the Arawaks significantly shaped the cultural heritage of the Caribbean. Key characteristics of the Arawak people. First, agriculture and diet. The Arawaks were skilled farmers who cultivated crops like cassava or yucca, maize, sweet potatoes, beans, and peppers. Cassava was a staple of their diet and was used to make bread. They also relied on fishing, hunting, and gathering, incorporating seafood, wild game, and fruits into their meals. Second characteristic, settlements and social structure. The Arawaks lived in villages with large communal houses called bohils, which is round structures, and rectangular structures called Caneyes, where chiefs called caciques and their families lived. They had a relatively egalitarian society through the caciques held authority in decision making and religious rituals. The society was organized into clans or kinship groups with clear rules and responsibilities. Third characteristic: language and beliefs. The Arawaks spoke the Arawakan language, which is part of a larger language family extending into South America. Many of the words, such as hammock, canoe, and barbecue, were adopted by Europeans and remain in use today. They practice animistic and polytheistic religions, believing in multiple deities and spirits tied to natural elements. Their gods included the deity of the sea, Yukahu, and the goddess of the moon and fertility, Atabe. The Arawaks also believed in an afterlife and revered the spirits of ancestors. Fourth characteristics: art and craftsmanship. The Arawaks were known for their artistic craftsmanship. They made pottery, intricate carvings, and stone tools, and created jewelry and decorations from shells, bones, and feathers. They also engaged in petroglyph carvings on rocks, which depicted spiritual symbols and are found throughout the Caribbean. Fifth characteristic: encounter with Europeans. When Christopher Columbus arrived in the Caribbean in 1492, he encountered Arawak communities in the Bahamas and Hispaniola. Initially, interactions were peaceful, but the Arawaks suffered greatly from European colonization. Exposure to European diseases which they had no immunity against and forced labor under Spanish colonizers led to a rapid decline in their population. By the mid-16th century, the Arawak population had been largely decimated. Sixth characteristic: legacy and influence. Despite their near extinction due to colonization, the Arawaks left a lasting cultural impact on the Caribbean. Elements of their language, agricultural practices, and art survive today. Many Caribbean traditions, including certain food preparations and festivals, are thought to have roots in Arawak culture. The Arawaks represent a significant part of Caribbean history and modern descendants of Taino culture continue to honor their heritage, especially in places like Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic, where Taino influence remains culturally significant. While the Siboney people's presence dwindled over time as they either assimilated with incoming Arawak groups or were displaced by the Caribs, though their influence is remembered in archaeological sites across the Caribbean. The term Siboney itself remains as a legacy and is sometimes referenced in cultural history and place names throughout the Caribbean region. Now, who are the Caribs? The Caribs, also known as Kalinago, are an indigenous people of the Caribbean who originally inhabited parts of the Lesser Antilles, including islands like Dominica, St. Vincent, and Antigua and Barbuda, as well as parts of the northern coast of South America, known for their seafaring skills, warrior culture, and unique way of life. The Caribs played a significant role in the history and culture of the Caribbean before and during European colonization. Origins and lifestyle of the Caribs. Let's talk about this. First, ancestry. The Caribs likely migrated from the Orinoco River region in South America, gradually spreading into the Caribbean islands over centuries. They settled in the Lesser Antilles and engaged in trade, fishing, and hunting. Second, culture and social structure. Carib society was structured into clans and extended families with a communal way of life, known for their warrior culture. The Caribs often engage in territorial defense and raids against neighboring groups, including the Arawaks. Third, seafaring skills. The Caribs were skilled navigators and boat builders. They used large dugout canoes, which allowed them to travel between islands and across large stretches of ocean. Now let's talk about the Caribs' religion and beliefs. The Caribs practiced animism, believing that spirits existed in nature, animals, and even objects. They held shamans or spiritual leaders in high regard, seeking their guidance in matters of healing, hunting, and warfare. They also had unique rituals and ceremonies to honor their gods and the natural world around them. Now, let's talk about the Caribs' interaction with Europeans. When Europeans arrived in the Caribbean in the 15th century, the Caribs were one of the primary indigenous groups they encountered. The Caribs fiercely resisted colonization, but despite their resistance, many were ultimately affected by the arrival of Europeans through conflict, disease, and displacement. The Caribs' legacy and modern day. The Caribs, or Kalinago, have left a profound impact on Caribbean culture. Words from their language, such as hammock and canoe, were adopted by Europeans and remain in use today. Many Carib descendants still live in the Caribbean, notably in Dominica, where there is a designated Kalinago territory, preserving their heritage, traditions, and cultural identity. So now we've talked about the Siboney people, the Arawaks, and the Caribs. So let's continue this historical journey. In 1493, Christopher Columbus sighted the island of Antigua during his second voyage, naming it after the Church of Santa Maria de la Antigua in Spain. The name stuck, though Columbus never settled here. Instead, it was the English who established the first colony on Antigua in 1632. Who is Christopher Columbus? Christopher Columbus, 1451 to 1506, was an Italian navigator and explorer whose transatlantic voyages, sponsored by Spain in the late 15th century, initiated widespread contact between Europe and the Americas. He is often credited with discovering the New World for Europeans, though the Americas were already inhabited by indigenous peoples and had been visited by Norse explorers centuries earlier. Key facts about Christopher Columbus: his early life. Columbus was born in Genoa, modern-day Italy, around 1451. From a young age, he was drawn to the sea and learned navigation, cartography, and geography. He became interested in finding a westward route to Asia, believing it could lead to great wealth and fame. His motivation and sponsorship. During the 15th century, European powers were seeking direct trade routes to Asia to access valuable spices, silk, and other goods. Columbus theorized that by sailing west across the Atlantic, he could reach Asia more directly, bypassing the long and perilous overland routes. After being rejected by Portugal and others, Columbus eventually gained the support of Spain's monarchs, King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, who agreed to fund his journey in exchange for potential wealth and the promise of spreading Christianity. Christopher Columbus voyages. The first voyage, that was in 1492. Columbus set sail with 3 ships, the Santa Maria, Pinta, and Nina. On August 3, 1492, on October 12, 1492, he reached what is now known as the Bahamas, claiming it for Spain, believing he had reached Asia. He referred to the people he encountered as Indians. In subsequent voyages, Columbus made 3 more voyages to the Caribbean, exploring islands such as Hispaniola, modern-day Haiti, and the Dominican Republic, Cuba, and parts of Central and South America. Each voyage expanded Spain's influence in the New World, though his hopes of finding Asian wealth were not realized. His interactions with indigenous peoples. Columbus' encounters with indigenous communities were complex and often violent. His expeditions quickly shifted from exploration to conquest, establishing settlements and forcing the indigenous populations into labor under brutal conditions. This began a wave of European colonization that devastated indigenous populations through violence, enslavement, and diseases like smallpox, to which the native populations had no immunity. His later years and legacy. Columbus faced criticism and legal challenges later in his life. He was arrested briefly due to his poor governance and treatment of colonists and indigenous people in Hispaniola. After returning to Spain, he spent his last years in relative obscurity and he died in 1506. Despite his hardships, Columbus is often celebrated and criticized for his role in connecting Europe with the Americas. His journeys set off the Columbian Exchange, a significant transfer of plants, animals, people, and cultures between the Old and New Worlds. However, this exchange also brought exploitation, slavery, and severe environmental and societal changes. Its controversy and re-evaluation. Columbus' legacy is controversial. Once viewed as a heroic figure, his treatment of indigenous populations and the destructive impact of European colonization have led to more critical re-evaluations of his role in history. In recent decades, indigenous and advocacy groups have called for recognition of the devastating consequences his voyages had on native populations. In response, some countries and US states have replaced Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day to honor and acknowledge indigenous cultures and histories. The historical impact. Columbus' voyages mark a major turning point in world history, sparking a period of European exploration and colonization that transformed the Americas. His expeditions are seen as both a symbol of exploration and a prelude to the widespread colonization, oppression, and transformation of indigenous societies across the Western Hemisphere. Now that we've gotten a broad idea of who Christopher Columbus is, we will continue. Early settlers in Antigua and Barbuda experimented with various crops, but it wasn't until sugarcane was introduced in the 1670s that the islands began to take on a new, more profitable but darker role in the Caribbean economy. The shift to sugarcane transformed Antigua, but at a steep human cost. Enslaved Africans were brought to the islands in large numbers, forced to work on vast sugar plantations that lined Antigua's fertile plains. For the enslaved, life was brutal, with long hours of back-breaking labor, harsh conditions, and a constant struggle for survival. Despite the oppressive conditions, enslaved Africans in Antigua resisted in subtle and powerful ways, preserving elements of their heritage, language, and traditions, planting the seeds of a culture that remains central to Antigua today. In the early 1800s, growing anti-slavery sentiment in Britain led to the abolition movement gaining momentum. By 1834, slavery was officially abolished throughout the British Empire, including Antigua, but freedom was hard-won, and many former slaves faced social and economic challenges in the years that followed. Let's talk about this abolitionist movement. The abolitionist movement was a social and political campaign aimed at ending slavery and the slave trade. It spanned multiple countries and regions, primarily in the late 18th and 19th centuries, and encompassed a diverse group of individuals, organizations, and ideologies advocating for the freedom and rights of enslaved people. We will talk about the origins, key figures, methods, and impact. First, let's talk about the origins of the abolitionist movement. Under this, we have the Enlightenment ideas. Let's break down the Enlightenment ideas. The movement gained momentum during the Age of Enlightenment in the 18th century, where ideas about individual rights, liberty, and equality began to challenge the institution of slavery. Next, let's talk about religious influences as part of its origin. Various religious groups, including Quakers, Evangelicals, and Methodists, played significant roles in advocating for abolition. They viewed slavery as morally wrong and contrary to Christian teachings. Third, resistance and revolts as part of origins. Enslaved people's resistance, including revolts like the Asian Revolution from 1791 to 1804, drew attention to the brutal realities of slavery and the desire for freedom. Key figures in the abolitionist movement. We have Frederick Douglass, an escaped enslaved person who became a leading voice for abolition in the United States. Douglass wrote several autobiographies detailing his experiences and argued for equality and justice for African Americans. Another key person is William Wilberforce, a British politician and social reformer. Wilberforce was instrumental in the campaign to abolish the slave trade in the British Empire. His tireless efforts led to the passage of the Slavery Abolition Act of 1833. Another key figure is Sojourner Truth, an African American abolitionist and women's rights activist. Truth was born into slavery but escaped and became a powerful speaker, advocating for both abolition and women's rights, famously delivering her "Ain't I a Woman" speech. Another key figure is Harriet Tubman, an escaped enslaved woman who became a conductor on the Underground Railroad. Tubman helped hundreds of enslaved people escape to freedom in the North. Then we have the abolitionist societies. Numerous societies formed to promote abolition, such as the American Anti-Slavery Society in 1833, which used various tactics to spread their message. So now, what are the methods of the abolitionists? We have 1. Public advocacy. Abolitionists used pamphlets, books, speeches, and newspapers to raise awareness about the atrocities of slavery and promote their cause. They organized lectures and public meetings to educate the public. Second method, legal challenges. Some abolitionists worked with the legal system to challenge slavery laws. Court cases like Dred Scott v. Sanford in 1857 sparked national debates about slavery and its legality. Third method, Underground Railroad. A network of safe houses and roads established to help enslaved people escape to free states and Canada. It involved many abolitionists, both black and white, who risked their lives to aid escapees. Fourth method, boycotts and economic pressure. Abolitionists encouraged consumers to boycott products produced by enslaved labor, particularly sugar and cotton, to economically pressure slaveholders. Fifth method used, the international pressure. Abolitionists worked to influence foreign governments to end their participation in the slave trade and slavery, leading to treaties and legal reforms. Now let's talk about the impact of the abolitionist movement. 1. Legislation. The efforts of abolitionists led to significant legal changes, including the abolition of the slave trade in Britain in 1807 and the United States in 1808. The Slavery Abolition Act of 1833 in Britain ended slavery in most of the British Empire. 2. Civil War and emancipation. In the United States, the abolitionist movement significantly influenced the national discourse on slavery, culminating in the Civil War from 1861 to 1865. The Emancipation Proclamation in 1863 declared the freedom of enslaved people in the Confederate States. 3. Social change. The abolitionist movement laid the groundwork for subsequent civil rights movements, advocating for equality and justice for all marginalized groups, including women and racial minorities. 4. Cultural legacy. The movement influenced literature, art, and political thought, inspiring future generations to advocate for human rights and social justice. Works like Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin were pivotal in raising awareness and empathy for the plight of enslaved people. The global abolition movement. While the abolitionist movement is often associated with the United States and Britain, it had global dimensions. For example, Haiti. The successful slave revolt led to Haiti's independence in 1804, becoming the first country to abolish slavery and the second independent nation in the Americas. Another example is Brazil. The abolition movement in Brazil culminated in the abolition of slavery in 1888, making it the last country in the Americas to do so. Another example is Africa. Various movements emerged in African nations advocating for an end of both external slavery, which is the transatlantic slave trade, and the internal slavery practices. The abolitionist movement was a vital force for social change, challenging deeply ingrained systems of oppression and advocating for the basic human rights of enslaved people. Its legacy continues to influence contemporary discussions about race, justice, and equality, highlighting the ongoing struggle against all forms of slavery and exploitation worldwide. Following emancipation, Antigua's economy faced uncertainty. The former enslaved people, now free, struggled to build new lives. Many remained tied to the land, working as wage laborers on the very plantations where they had once been enslaved. The decline of the sugar industry in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, compounded by natural disasters and global market pressures, left the economy vulnerable. But Antiguans found ways to adapt, forming communities and small-scale farms, holding on to their heritage as they navigated these changes. By the mid-20th century, calls for self-governance and greater political rights echoed across the Caribbean. In Antigua, where Cornwall Bird emerged as a prominent leader, championing labor rights and pushing for political reform. Through his leadership, Antiguans began to envision a future free from colonial rule. In 1967, Antigua and Barbuda achieved associated statehood, giving them control over internal affairs. After years of political effort, full independence was granted on November 1st, 1981, marking a new era for the Twin Islands. Now, who is Ver Cornwall Bird? Ver Cornwall Bird, 1910 to 1999, was a prominent Antiguan politician and a significant figure in the history of Antigua and Barbuda. He played a crucial role in the country's political landscape and was instrumental in the fight for independence from British colonial rule. Let's talk about his early life. Birth. Ver Bird was born on December 28, 1910 in the village of St. John's, Antigua. Education. He received his early education in Antigua before becoming involved in various jobs, including work in the civil service. His political career. First, let's talk about the trade union activism. Bird was initially involved in trade union activities and became a prominent voice for workers' rights. He helped establish the Antigua Trades and Labor Union (ATLU) in 1939, advocating for improved labor conditions and wages. 2. Political leadership. He founded the Antigua Labour Party (ALP) in 1943, which aimed to represent the interests of the working class and push for social and political reforms. His first premier. Ver Bird became the first chief minister of Antigua and Barbuda after the introduction of self-government in 1960. He served in this capacity until 1968. Ver Bird contributions to independence. First, let's talk about his advocacy for independence. Bird was a strong advocate for the independence of Antigua and Barbuda from British colonial rule. His leadership and political efforts contributed to the eventual achievement of independence on November 1st, 1981. Him as a prime minister. After independence, Ver Bird served as the first prime minister of Antigua and Barbuda from 1981 to 1984. His administration focused on economic development, social programs, and building infrastructure. His legacy, retirement and later life. Bird retired from active politics in 1984 but remained an influential figure in Antiguan society. He passed away on June 24, 1999. His recognition. Bird is remembered as a founding father of Antigua and Barbuda. His contributions to labor rights, self-governance, and national independence have left a lasting impact on the country. His civic honors. In recognition of his service, various institutions and initiatives in Antigua and Barbuda are named after him, including the Bird International Airport and the Bird Senior Memorial Fund, and more recently, the former Mount St. John Medical Center is now Sir Lester Bird Medical Center. Cornwall Bird Sr. played a pivotal role in shaping the political landscape of Antigua and Barbuda. His leadership, dedication, and labor rights and commitment to independence are celebrated in the nation's history. He is remembered as a key figure in the struggle for social justice and national sovereignty in the Caribbean. In Antigua today, we also have the VC Bird Day, which is a public holiday in Antigua and Barbuda on December 9th. It is a day to honor and celebrate the contributions of Sir Cornwall Bird to the nation. Today, Antigua and Barbuda is celebrated for its rich cultural heritage influenced by African, European, and Indigenous roots. Festivals like Carnival celebrate its diversity, featuring calypso music, vibrant costumes, and joyous parades. The influence of African heritage remains strong in local art, dance, and cuisine. The modern economy has diversified with tourism as a major driver. Each year, thousands of visitors come to experience the warm hospitality, pristine beaches, and cultural richness that Antigua and Barbuda offers. From the UNESCO World Heritage Site at Nelson's Dockyard to the vibrant streets of St. John's, the islands stand as symbols of resilience and beauty. As we all know, the full meaning of UNESCO is United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. It is a specialized agency of the UN, United Nations, aimed at promoting world peace and security through international cooperation in education, the sciences, and culture. Founded in 1945, UNESCO seeks to foster the intellectual and moral solidarity of humanity and aims to build peace in the minds of people by promoting education, cultural diversity, scientific knowledge, and freedom of expression. So just a little overview of what UNESCO means and what they do, its impact in the world. In recent years, Antigua and Barbuda has faced unique challenges from climate change impacts like hurricanes and sea level rise to the need for sustainable tourism. The government has initiated various projects to protect natural resources and ensure resilience against environmental threats. The government of Antigua and Barbuda has implemented these projects. The first one is coastal zone management. The government has focused on sustainable coastal management to protect against erosion, manage marine resources, and enhance resilience to climate change. The Coastal Zone Management Plan aims to address coastal development and conservation, ensuring sustainable use of coastal and marine resources. The second project is Environmental Protection and Management Act. These are not in any particular order. This act provides a framework for the sustainable management of natural resources and the protection of the environment. It regulates activities that may impact the environment, including land development, waste management, and resource extraction. Third project, Protected Areas Network. The government has established protected areas to conserve biodiversity and important ecosystems. The establishment of national parks and marine protected areas such as the Frigate Bird Sanctuary and Delville's Bridge National Park aims to protect national habitats and species. Fourth project, Renewable Energy Project. To reduce dependence on fossil fuels, the government is promoting renewable energy sources like solar and wind power. The Antigua and Barbuda Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Sector Development Project focuses on increasing renewable energy use and enhancing energy efficiency in public and private sectors. Fifth project, Waste Management Initiatives. The government has initiated programs to improve waste management practices and reduce pollution. The introduction of waste separation and recycling programs aims to reduce landfill use and promote sustainable waste management practices. Sixth project, National Adaptation Strategy. This strategy focuses on enhancing resilience to climate change impacts, particularly in vulnerable sectors such as agriculture and tourism. The government is implementing measures to protect infrastructure and livelihoods from climate-related threats such as sea level rise and extreme weather events. Seventh project, Sustainable Agriculture Programs. Initiatives to promote sustainable agricultural practices and protect natural resources while ensuring food security. The Antigua and Barbuda Agricultural Development Program aims to enhance agricultural resilience and reduce environmental impact through sustainable farming techniques. Eighth project, Public Awareness Campaigns. The government conducts educational campaigns to raise awareness about environmental issues and promote conservation efforts. Programs like Earth Day celebrations and environmental workshops aim to engage the community in sustainable practices. Ninth project, Collaborations with international organizations. The government collaborates with international organizations for funding and technical support on environmental projects. Partnerships with agencies like the United Nations Development Programme (UNDP) and the Global Environment Facility (GEF) help fund projects related to biodiversity, climate change adaptation, and resource management. 10th project, Climate Change Adaptation Project. Initiatives aimed at assessing and reducing the vulnerabilities of communities to climate change. The Climate Resilience Execution Agency of Antigua and Barbuda, CREA, focuses on implementing climate resilience projects to protect infrastructure and promote sustainable development. These initiatives reflect the government of Antigua and Barbuda's commitment to protecting its natural resources and enhancing resilience against environmental threats. By focusing on sustainable management, community engagement, and collaboration with international partners, the government aims to ensure a sustainable and resilient future for its citizens and ecosystems. Social issues, including economic inequality, also continue to shape the nation's journey, but Antiguans remain united, proud of their heritage, and focused on building a sustainable future for generations to come. I will conclude this history lesson by saying that Antigua and Barbuda's history is a testament to the endurance of the human spirit. From the indigenous cultures that first called this land home, to the legacies of colonialism, the resilience of its people, and the triumphs of independence, these islands embody a rich and layered story. As you walk along Antigua's beaches, explore its historical sites, or join in the festivities of Carnival, remember the history that shaped this nation and the vibrant culture that continues to thrive. Thank you for joining us on this journey through Antigua and Barbuda's past and present. May the story of these islands inspire us all to celebrate heritage, strength, and the beauty of diversity.
Let's go. Yeah. I'm like an addict, ooh, I gotta have it. I ain't even playing, got a really bad habit. If it moves, gotta grab it, fuse like a magnet. Lose, won't have it till I'm doomed in a casket. I ain't playing, got a weird mind. If you work 8 hours, I'ma work 9. If the shoot tastes sour, you should taste mine. I'ma stay in power for a long time. Get up, nah, I ain't a quitter. Toss